Close your eyes for a moment and picture a life where nothing feels incomplete. A life where financial flow feels natural, where the right opportunities seem to arrive without force, and where your mind is no longer clouded by fear, but steadied by quiet confidence. Now consider this carefully. What if everything you have been longing for is not actually far from you? What if the things you have prayed for are already on their way into your experience right now? You are not hearing this by coincidence. Something within you is already shifting, already opening. The version of you that carried doubt, stress, and constant uncertainty is beginning to loosen its hold. In its place, a steadier version of you is forming, one that no longer lives in pursuit, but in attraction. From this moment, something changes inside you, because the instant you accept that your desire is already unfolding, your entire inner state begins to reorganize itself. Take a slow breath and repeat quietly within yourself, "Everything I want is already coming to me." Most people move through life in a cycle of waiting and reacting. They look outside themselves every morning for proof that life is getting better. They check their finances, their relationships, their problems, and based on what they see, they decide how they should feel. Hope rises or falls depending on external conditions. But real transformation begins when you understand a deeper principle. Your inner state is not shaped by the outer world. It is the inner world that eventually shapes what you experience outside. Once this is understood, you stop postponing peace until circumstances improve. You stop delaying confidence until success appears. You stop waiting for love or abundance to show up before you allow yourself to feel worthy. Instead, you begin to live as though what you desire is already established within you. As this becomes your dominant way of being, your external reality gradually begins to adjust itself to match the state you consistently hold. This is where many people break down in their belief. They say one thing with words, but carry a completely different state within. They speak of abundance, but feel lack. They speak of peace, but internally live in tension. They speak of a new life, while emotionally holding on to the old identity. Life always reflects the state you live in most consistently, not the words you occasionally say. To assume the wish fulfilled means you shift inward first. You begin to think, feel, and respond as though your desire is no longer a distant goal, but a present fact in consciousness. You step out of the identity of someone trying to get there and into the identity of someone who is already there. Imagine someone who desires financial stability. Instead of living in stress or scarcity, they begin to carry a quiet sense of security within themselves. Their thoughts change, their emotional reactions soften, and their inner dialogue becomes calm and steady. Even before anything changes outside, something within them settles. That internal shift is what begins to reorganize their experience over time. The key is the feeling of already having it. Not forced excitement, not pretending, but a natural inner acceptance that it is already done. When that feeling becomes stable within you, your subconscious mind begins to accept it as reality. And once it is accepted internally, it must eventually express itself externally in some form. This is why imagination carries so much power. It is not escape, it is creation in motion. Whatever you repeatedly see within your mind, especially when combined with feeling, becomes an impression on your subconscious. And over time, life reorganizes itself around that impression. You stop asking when it will arrive because that question places it in delay. You stop obsessing over how it will happen because your job is not to engineer every detail. Your responsibility is to remain aligned with the state of fulfillment. Even when nothing around you appears different, you stay steady. Just as a seed grows underground before anything is visible, your inner assumption is already active even when the surface has not yet changed. So you walk forward with quiet certainty. You no longer argue with what you see. You no longer return to old thoughts just because evidence has not arrived yet. Instead, you hold the state. You think from abundance rather than lack. You respond from stability rather than fear. You allow gratitude to exist now, not as a reaction to results, but as a reflection of inner knowing. And slowly, without force, life begins to mirror that internal position. The world has no choice but to reflect the state you occupy most often. When you remain faithful to the feeling that your desire is already fulfilled, what once existed only within you begins to appear in your outer reality. And in that realization, you understand a simple truth. Everything you experience outside has always begun within you. Every success, every failure, every opportunity, every limitation, every relationship, and every result is directly connected to the thoughts, emotions, and assumptions you repeatedly allow within your mind. Most people spend years trying to fix their outer world without realizing that what they see outside is only an echo of what already exists inside. Real transformation never begins on the surface. It always begins within consciousness. The world around you works like a mirror. A mirror does not change the person standing in front of it. It only reflects what is already there. In the same way, life is constantly reflecting your dominant inner state back to you. If your inner world is filled with fear, then fear-like experiences seem to repeat themselves in different forms. If your inner world carries rejection, then situations that mirror rejection appear again and again. But when your inner state shifts into worthiness, abundance, confidence, and emotional security, your outer experience gradually starts aligning with those states. This is why external change without inner change rarely lasts. A person may temporarily gain money, success, or opportunities, but if their identity inside still belongs to lack, they often lose it or sabotage it. Reality always follows consciousness, not the other way around. What you consistently accept as true within yourself becomes the blueprint for your life experience. Most people are completely unaware of the constant internal dialogue running in the background of their mind. Thoughts like, "Nothing ever works for me," "I always struggle," or "Success is for other people," may never be spoken aloud, but they become emotional instructions to the subconscious mind. And the subconscious does not question them. It simply accepts repeated thoughts mixed with emotion as truth and begins expressing them in external reality. Every thought, when combined with feeling, becomes a seed planted in consciousness. Over time, those seeds grow into real-life experiences that match them exactly. If you want your life to change, you must first change the inner story you keep repeating about yourself. You must stop identifying with past failures, old disappointments, and emotional pain that no longer defines who you are becoming. The moment you choose a new inner identity, you activate a new direction in your outer world. This shift is not forced. It happens through awareness, repetition, and emotional consistency. You begin to observe your thoughts instead of obeying them. Fear no longer becomes an instruction, and doubt no longer becomes a final truth. Instead, you gently redirect your focus toward what you desire to experience. Imagine a person who wants abundance, but constantly feels anxious about money. Even when small opportunities appear, their dominant emotional state is still rooted in scarcity, so they unconsciously reject or block what could have helped them. But when that same person begins to feel internally secure, grateful, and trusting, something subtle changes. Their energy changes, their decisions change, their emotional reactions change, and even their perception of opportunities expands. Life does not respond only to spoken words, it responds to the emotional frequency behind those words. You can say positive things while still feeling hopeless inside, but it is the feeling that shapes reality, not the surface statement. Your dominant emotional state works like a magnet, drawing in experiences that match its frequency. This is why inner stability is more important than changing external conditions. External situations will always shift, but your inner awareness has the power to remain steady regardless of circumstances. When you persist in feelings of confidence, gratitude, abundance, and certainty, life begins reorganizing itself around those internal assumptions. You are not powerless in this process. Your imagination, your beliefs, and your emotions are active creative forces shaping your reality every single day. One of the greatest misunderstandings about abundance is the belief that it begins in the physical world first. Most people think they must see money, success, or stability before they are allowed to feel secure or grateful. But the process works in reverse. The feeling must come first. Physical evidence always follows internal state. If you constantly focus on what is missing and emotionally react to lack, you deepen the impression of scarcity in your subconscious mind, and life reflects that back repeatedly. This is why many people remain stuck in the same cycles for years. They wait for the outside world to change before they change internally. They say, "Once I have money, I will feel calm," or "Once success arrives, I will feel confident." But abundance does not begin after the result appears. It begins in the state you choose before it appears. The real shift happens when you learn to feel secure before security is visible, and to feel grateful before evidence fully arrives. This is not about pretending or forcing positivity. It is about aligning emotionally with the version of yourself who already has what you desire. There is a clear difference between fake affirmation and genuine inner embodiment. A stable mindset is not about money alone. It is emotional certainty. It is the quiet inner knowing that says, "I am supported. Life is working with me. Opportunities are always unfolding." When a person operates from this state, their entire behavior naturally changes. They stop acting from desperation and start moving from confidence. They take better decisions, notice better opportunities, and attract different experiences simply because their internal identity has shifted. The subconscious mind responds far more strongly to feeling than to words alone. You can repeat affirmations endlessly, but if your dominant feeling is fear, the fear becomes the instruction. This is why gratitude is so powerful. Gratitude allows you to emotionally experience abundance before it physically appears. It shifts your attention from absence to presence, from lack to sufficiency, from waiting to receiving. The moment you begin appreciating your life as though everything is already unfolding in your favor, you change your internal signal. You no longer broadcast scarcity, you broadcast trust, and life always reflects that signal back to you in some form. The outer world cannot help but mirror the identity you consistently maintain within yourself. If you feel unworthy, life reflects limitation. If you feel abundant, life begins opening possibilities. If you feel secure, your decisions and experiences begin to align with that security. Everything begins within, and everything eventually returns to match it. This transformation often unfolds quietly at first. You may not immediately see dramatic changes in your external circumstances, but something far more important begins to shift within you. Fear starts to lose its grip. Anxiety becomes less dominant. The constant mental noise around what is missing begins to fade, and in its place a quieter, steadier expectation starts to grow. You begin to assume, almost naturally, that things will work out in your favor. And that subtle shift in consciousness becomes the foundation for everything that follows. You must stop evaluating your future only through present conditions, because what you see right now is only a reflection of past thinking, past assumptions, and past emotional patterns. Your current situation is not your destiny. It is simply a temporary snapshot of what you once believed. The moment your inner state changes, a new timeline begins to form. The person who understands abundance knows this deeply. The feeling of wealth, security, and stability must become familiar internally before it fully appears externally. So the real work begins within. You start carrying yourself differently, speaking differently, and thinking differently. You stop reinforcing stories of struggle, and you begin questioning the identity that keeps you limited. You ask yourself a simple but powerful question. How would I feel if everything I desire was already fulfilled? And then you practice becoming that version of yourself in your daily life. You feel peace before peace is confirmed by circumstances. You feel gratitude before anything changes outside. You feel abundance before there is physical evidence of it. Because once your emotional state accepts something as real, your outer world has no choice but to reorganize itself around that inner acceptance. What once existed only in imagination slowly begins taking form in reality, shaped by the consciousness you consistently embody. Most people live trapped in waiting. They wait for success to arrive before allowing themselves to feel confident. They wait for money to appear before feeling secure. They wait for love, validation, or opportunity before feeling worthy or fulfilled. In doing so, they unconsciously separate themselves from the very reality they want to experience. Waiting reinforces distance. It keeps desire in the future instead of allowing it to live within the present moment of consciousness. And as long as you identify as someone who is still trying, life reflects that identity back to you. The shift happens when you stop waiting and start embodying. You stop seeing yourself as someone moving toward abundance and begin identifying as someone who already lives from abundance internally. Everything changes when you move from hoping to knowing. Identity is the foundation of experience. Two people can walk into the same situation, face the same opportunity, or encounter the same challenge, yet their experience will be completely different because their internal identity is different. One operates from confidence, the other from doubt. One expects possibility, the other expects limitation. And life responds accordingly, not to words alone, but to the deeper sense of self that drives perception, behavior, and emotional response. This is why chasing without inner change feels exhausting. You can pursue success, love, or stability externally, but if your internal identity remains rooted in lack, you continuously recreate the same patterns. Real transformation begins when identity shifts first. When you begin seeing yourself differently, you naturally behave differently. You no longer operate from desperation, you begin operating from certainty. And from that state, life starts responding in new ways because your internal signal has changed. To embody a new reality means you begin living from the version of yourself who already has what you desire. If you want abundance, you start thinking from abundance now. If you want confidence, you begin expressing confidence now. If you want peace, you stop feeding thoughts that create inner conflict. This does not mean ignoring reality or pretending problems do not exist. It means refusing to let temporary circumstances define your identity. Your current situation is not your final story. It is simply the outcome of earlier patterns of thought and emotion. And just as it was created, it can also be rewritten. The power lies in repetition and consistency. A small inner shift, when sustained, becomes a new personality state. When you repeatedly tell yourself that things are not working, your mind reinforces that belief. But when you begin consistently affirming alignment, progress, and support, your emotional state begins to change, and with it, your perception of reality. You start noticing opportunities you previously ignored. You begin reacting differently to challenges. You stop labeling yourself through old limitations. The identity you maintain internally determines the life you experience externally. This is why persistence matters more than intensity. Temporary motivation fades, but a stable inner assumption gradually reshapes your entire reality. You must stop waiting for the outside world to validate who you are becoming. Instead, you decide internally first and allow reality to catch up later. Speak, think, and act from the version of you that already exists in imagination. Because imagination is not escape, it is the blueprint of creation. The moment you accept a new identity within, a new world begins forming around you. One of the deepest truths about transformation is that belief always comes before evidence. Most people reverse this natural process because they are trained to trust only what is visible and measurable. They wait for external proof before allowing themselves to think differently, and in doing so, they stay stuck in the same emotional loop. Real change never begins in the outside world. It begins in the inner world, in the quiet decision to assume something new, even when nothing around you confirms it yet. Belief is not a reaction to reality. It is the starting point that slowly reshapes reality. If you only allow yourself to believe what is already proven, then your life can only ever repeat what already exists. But when you understand belief as a seed rather than a harvest, everything shifts. A seed does not look like a tree at first, yet it already contains the entire structure of what it will become. In the same way, your assumptions contain the future before it becomes visible. Real belief is an internal certainty that does not depend on timing or immediate validation. It is a steady, inner agreement with the direction you have chosen, even when the outside world has not caught up yet. This is where most people struggle, because the gap between inner change and outer evidence can feel uncomfortable. Nothing may appear different in the beginning, and that silence often makes people doubt their own progress. But underneath that surface-level stillness, something real is already forming. Just like roots grow in darkness before anything appears above the soil, your inner assumptions begin reorganizing your experience long before physical proof shows up. The process is always active, even when it feels invisible. The key is persistence without contradiction, because belief only works when it is protected from constant internal conflict. Every time you return to doubt, you interrupt the direction you are trying to build. Every time you return to certainty, you reinforce it. Over time, this repetition becomes more than just thought patterns. It becomes emotional familiarity, and emotional familiarity slowly becomes identity. You are no longer just trying to think differently. You are becoming someone who naturally expects a different outcome. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A strong moment of belief is not enough if it is followed by long periods of contradiction. What matters is the steady return to the same inner position, even when external appearances try to pull you away from it. As this continues, your perception begins to shift in subtle ways. You stop interpreting every delay as failure and start seeing it as timing. You stop treating uncertainty as danger and start recognizing it as part of movement. Your mind begins filtering reality differently, almost automatically, and you begin noticing things you previously ignored. Opportunities, signals, and small openings were always present, but your old perception was too focused on lack to see them. As belief stabilizes, your emotional response to life also changes. Fear loses its authority, not because challenges disappear, but because your interpretation of them evolves. You begin to feel more steady inside yourself, less reactive, and more aligned with the direction you have chosen internally. When belief becomes consistent and emotionally real, it stops being just a mental exercise and becomes a lived state of awareness. It starts shaping how you move through the day, how you interpret people, and how you respond to situations. You begin to carry an inner expectation that things are unfolding in your favor, even if you cannot yet explain how. This expectation quietly influences your choices, your tone, your patience, and your willingness to continue forward without forcing outcomes. Obstacles no longer feel like permanent blocks. They feel like temporary pauses in a process that is still unfolding. You begin to realize that reality is not fixed in the way it first appears, but responsive to the internal state you consistently maintain. Over time, what you once only held as imagination begins to feel normal, and what once felt distant starts feeling familiar. This is the turning point where inner certainty starts expressing itself outwardly in ways that feel almost natural. The change does not arrive all at once in a dramatic moment, but it builds quietly until one day you recognize that things have already shifted. And when you look back, it becomes clear that nothing changed suddenly. It was always moving, always forming, always aligning, long before it became visible in your external world.